Well, now that you prepared your Active Directory on-prem environment and you understand the requirements for the Azure AD Connect, we're going to actually get ready to do an installation now. And when we do an installation, we've got a couple options we need to take into consideration. We're obviously going to go in and download it and then install it, and I'll show you what happens after you've done so. But when you kick off the installation, you have a couple choices. You have the Express and you have the Custom. Now under Express, this is your default installation option, and you're going to use this in a single forest topology, so nothing too complex. And this is going to configure password synchronization authentication. So it's a pretty straightforward. You don't really need to do a lot. It's more a point, click, and install type of thing. But if you want to get a little more complex, you have a custom installation, and you're going to use this for your multiple forests, and you're also going to use this for configuring optional features like ADFS, the Active Directory Federation Services, which we're going to talk about in a separate course. So be prepared before you kick off the installation so you know how to respond to these prompts when you get to that point. Let's step out to our desktop here and take a look at exploring the Azure AD Connect installation. So I've returned back to my image that is a Windows Server 2012 R2 Active Directory domain controller. I've already located and downloaded the Azure AD Connect tool. So I'm going to go ahead and kick that off. And it's going to install the Microsoft Azure AD Connect option, and notice it pops open the welcome screen. I can just click out of that, and then you're going to see it has another icon over here, so I can come back into that at any point in time. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on that and go right back to where we were, but I wanted to show you didn't have to complete it at this point in time. Let me drag my window all the way up here, and you're going to see it provides a welcome screen and a little bit of an explanation as to what this tool does. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yep, I'm agreeing with all this good stuff by clicking this checkbox. Now my continue button becomes active. So I'll click continue. And it brings me to the Express settings. And as I mentioned, if you have a single Windows Server Active Directory forest, we're going to do this for you. We're going to configure synchronization of identities in the current AD forest of MicroTechPoint. That's my domain on my on-prem environment. Configure password synchronization, start an initial synchronization, and then synchronize all attributes and enable auto upgrade. And I can get some additional information here. So that's my Express flavor. Now notice I can go down here to the bottom right and click Use Express Settings, or we can choose to use the Customize option. Let me go ahead and just give you a quick glance at that. I'm going to click on Customize. Now it's coming in. We've got some different options on the left-hand side here. First off, install required components. There's no existing synchronization service found on the computer, so the Azure AD Connect synchronization service will be installed. Then I can go in and choose optional configuration options. Specify a custom installation location. Use an existing SQL Server. Remember, if I don't choose this item, it's going to install SQL Server Express for me. Use an existing service account and specify custom sync groups. And so we'll say that we have already installed SQL Server out here. So I'll click on that guy here. It's going to ask me for the server name and the instance name in the event the SQL Server instance is not the default instance on that server. I can specify a custom location. By default, it's going to install in SQL and program files Microsoft Azure AD Sync. We can go ahead and specify an existing service account if we want down here and specify custom sync groups. So this is where I would come in if I wasn't performing a standard installation. But I'm pretty happy doing installation using the Express settings, especially with this one forest, one domain in one forest, in fact, that I have. So I'm going to click Previous, and then I'm going to go back to Use Express Settings. It's installing the required components along the bottom here. And now it's asking me to connect to my Azure AD. So I need the name for us to do that. So Brian at azmtp.onmicrosoft.com. And then my password up there. And then it connects. Now it's going to ask me to enter the Active Directory Domain Services Enterprise Administrator credentials. So I'm going to specify in here, MicroTechPoint Administrator. So this is my on-prem, and the previous one is my Office 365 configuration. So I'll go ahead and click Next. And you'll see on this page here, it's showing my Azure AD sign-in configuration. Now I have two Active Directory UPN suffixes. MicroTechPoint.com hasn't been added to the Azure AD domain because because I have a separate tenant already hosting microtechpoint.com. That's where I run my business from. So I can't add this one here because it can only be in one tenant. And the mtp.com is a routable domain that I added when I showed you how we may have a problem or how we can work around a company that's already created a non-routable domain. So am I stuck here? No, I'm not, because what I have down here is the continue without any verified domains. Now notice the next in the bottom right hand side is not activated, so I'm going to click on that and then it allows me to continue. But remember, even though I'm continuing, I have that restriction of 50,000 objects by default. In order for me to work up to 300,000 objects, I would have had to verify this domain. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. And it's ready to configure. It's going to install the synchronization engine, configure the connector for Azure AD, configure a microtechpoint.com connector, enable password synchronization, enable auto upgrade, configure synchronization services on this computer. And after this configuration takes place, it's going to start the synchronization process. So I'm going to go ahead and click install. And it's going to go out and create my SQL Server Express local database, install a few other options it needs. I'm going to go ahead and let this bake. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video so that way you don't have a lengthy time of just watching this progress bar. And then I'll come right back when this configuration completes. And if you watch the screen and periodically release the pause, you can see the different phases that it went through. But we've got our configuration complete option, and it's providing some suggestions. The configuration is complete. You can now log into Azure or Office 365 portal to verify your user accounts from your local directory have been created. The Active Directory recycle bin is not enabled for your forest, and it's strongly recommended that you do that. And there's a Learn More option right here. To sync Windows 10 domain joined computers in Azure AD as registered devices, you need to run a PowerShell command called initialize-AD sync domain joined computer sync. That has to be one of the lengthiest PowerShell commands I've ever seen. And the last one indicates that the Azure Active Directory has been configured to use a unique AD attribute. So we are good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and click exit. And remember, at any point in time, I can come back into Azure AD Connect just by double-clicking on this desktop icon here. So that's how we can install the Azure AD Connect tool using the Express settings. And we took a peek at some of the custom settings that we have available to us as well. Now, as you saw, there were several tools and configuration options that took place during the installation of Azure AD Connect. Let's go down to our desktop here. And I'm going to click on the Start menu for Windows, click on the down arrow, and just scroll across here. And you're going to see in here we have the Azure AD Connect that was installed, Synchronization Rules Editor. I mentioned how we can use that for bulk changes. The Synchronization Service and the Synchronization Service Web Service Connector config. Those are all new items that were installed as part of the installation of Azure AD Connect. And notice they're categorized that way as well. So as we're talking through additional configuration options, this is where I would go and make those changes. So we'll just go ahead and close out of this and go back to our desktop. And then I'm going to pull down my Office 365 interface, and then we're going to click on users and then go to active users, and you're going to see we have a plethora of users in here now because we brought all those over from the Active Directory on-prem. Everyone that came over wasn't licensed, so I can actually filter by unlicensed users. And you'll see all these users were brought over from the on-prem Active Directory users of computers. You can see in the right-hand column they're unlicensed, and you'll see that they added a username or a login name of their first name and azmtp.onmicrosoft.com. So it did that for me as part of the synchronization. So that's how we can take on-prem users and synchronize them with Office 365 using the Azure AD Connect tool.